All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 2nd work session of the City of Falls Church City Council. Welcome to you all. This is a work session, which means members of the public are free to listen, but generally not participate in the actual discussion. At the end of tonight's meeting, we have a closed session, so be aware we'll clear the room and complete our meeting in a closed session without the public being present. Mr. Shields, do you have anything to add, or should we go ahead and get started with the agenda?
One thing I would add on the agenda, we have a series of items that are in the nature of updates for the City Council, and so from the staff perspective, we'll try to go through those very briskly and let the council discussion take as much time as you like. But because there are a number of sort of smaller issues that we're trying to update you on, our intention is not to dwell on each one and for a lengthy period of time, because we have a good number of them. And also, I just note in the closed session, the intent is to brief the council on discussions on franchise negotiations with Dominion, Virginia Power, and with Cox. And so that's what the closed session piece of it is. Negotiations are appropriate for closed session just to protect the city's negotiating position, but so we note that at the outset as well. So Paul Stoddard will review the transportation briefing items for the City Council.
Thank you, Wyatt. Before I jump into the transportation items, I do want to make one quick plug. This Saturday, there's going to be a community meeting in the community center starting at 10 a.m. to talk about the Parks chapter update for the comprehensive plan. Okay, so transportation items, we have 5 items to hit in 30 minutes. So I'm going to try and go through these fairly quickly, but I am hoping for a little bit of question and conversation about these. First up, at your seats today, there should have been a set of pictures about some recent changes that have been going on with paint. First thing is on one side is an image of the intersection of Parker and Kent. This was in response to the traffic calming case, which I'll talk a little bit about as I go through the memo, so we can sort of reserve this picture till later. The second one, which I don't have a memo for, Sharrows and wayfinding along Park Avenue and Maple Avenue. This is a project that started late in 2013 with the CACT wanting to find a way to get people using the WNOD trail into the business districts of the city. They came up with this idea of Sharrows along Park and Maple, working then with the Economic Development Authority, other members of city staff. We got this implemented. So you'll see the Sharrows are down on Park Avenue along with the wayfinding signs. Sharrows on Maple were supposed to go in tonight, but it's a little bit wet out there for painting, so we'll probably push that back a couple days. So into the items with supporting memos. First off, update on the Parker Avenue and Kent Street traffic calming case. This started in February of 2013 with a neighborhood request for traffic calming. In February of 2014, the neighborhood petitioned council for funding. Council granted it at that time. City staff wasn't prepared to move forward with implementation. It would have put at risk some of our grant-funded transportation projects. If you don't make consistent progress on those, you're at risk for deallocation. So staff didn't have it in the work plan until July of 2014. In July of 2014, staff did begin work on that. Had a sort of a mini kickoff with the transportation liaisons to let them know our expected schedule. On July 28, we launched a project website. People could get a sense of what was the public engagement process so far, what's going to be going forward, what is the approved solution, what's the implementation schedule, and also contact information in case people had additional questions. On August 18, we had a staff kickoff meeting with our on-call consultant, AMT, who's going to be doing the engineering work. On August 28, we installed striping out there, which is what this picture shows. And so you'll be able to see sort of with this striping what these curb extensions will do. They shorten the pedestrian crossing distance. They shorten the amount of time you're out there at risk of being hit by a car. They also, by bringing the sidewalk further out into the street, they greatly increase the chances that a motorist will see a pedestrian waiting or about to cross the street by bringing those pedestrians into the field of view of motorists.
If I could interrupt you quickly.
Sure.
This shows painted. Aren't they going to be actual extensions of the curb line?
Yes, and so the installation schedule we have right now is to go through engineering through the end of the year, and then we'll do construction beginning in the spring of next year. The engineering takes a little bit of time because we want to make sure we get the stormwater right. When you move the curb lines like this outward, you have a potential to create sort of a local flooding, pooling situation if you don't do it right. But we did know that this was, the first day of school was today, so we wanted to have something out there for the children since this is part of the TJ Trail. And so we use striping for now with the intention of following up with the fully constructed curb extensions, concrete, once we're ready for it.
Is there an ability to put any street trees in any of these?
That's one of the things we talked about with the neighborhoods, actually, is we were out there for a neighborhood meeting on August 26th. And I think what we're going to expect is for the adjacent property owners to take over care of the landscaping that's on that curb extension. So we really wanted to know from them what they wanted to see in there. And so we really focused on sort of low-growing things, low-maintenance things is what they seemed interested in. Street trees are a possibility. The problem is they create vision problems. One of the other things we talked about was the potential for some sort of bioretention or a rain garden or a xeriscaping, something like that, that would at least be a demonstration project of sort of what's possible with these kinds of areas.
Okay. Any other questions? Do you have more on this, or is that it?
That was it, just to tell you that the implementation schedule, we're going through 75% now, 75% design now. We'll bring that back to the CACT. They'll be our final check to make sure that what gets engineered is what the neighborhood had agreed with in the neighborhood survey. If the CACT signs off on it, then barring any sort of minor exceptions or changes, we'll go to the 100% engineering, start construction in the spring.
And when will this be completed?
Construction will begin in the spring of 2015. I assume it'll take a month, maybe 2 months to construct.
And is there also going to be striping of four-way intersections, not just the nubs?
Right. So, I'm
This
sorry,
looks
can you
like
repeat the
two.
question?
This looks like two of the ways, not four ways.
Sure, crosswalks?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the crosswalks we painted in, one crosswalk was easy to pick because it connects two existing sidewalk pieces. There actually are no other sidewalks there, and so we had focused on just the south side of the intersection. The north side has some issues with a retaining wall that's up there. And so initially we wanted to avoid the retaining wall and just do the crosswalks. I think now that we have it on the ground and the neighborhood's getting to get a look at it, that's one of the things we're going to look at when we finish the 75% engineering. Does the neighborhood want all four crosswalks in there?
Yeah, I think to me it makes sense to have a four-way crosswalks, not just two ways.
Yep.
And I tell you also, I think you ought to consider the street trees. It seems to me, instead of just having a little strip of grass, to actually have a species of trees that doesn't impede sight distance. I imagine they're out there. I'm sure plenty of communities have put trees in these kind of nubs. But to me, it seems like a nice opportunity to create, I mean, we are Tree City USA, to really create and add some street trees. Are there other comments, questions, Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. The neighborhood has already been in touch, and they're immensely thankful that the city has shown ability to move out and actually get some things done ahead of the construction. So I applaud those moves. I think it's very good. They're very happy that you're actually doing something. And I would say that if trees are not possible, then bioretention of some kind would be warranted. Would help out with the stormwater as well. I'm sure the Government Operations and Budget Finance Committee will take all that under consideration.
Please continue.
All right. So I'll move on to the next item, expanded transit service. You'll see a memo in your package that's addressed to the Economic Development Authority, the EDA, for their September 9 meeting, which is next Tuesday. So this grew out of sort of a standing request from the EDA. They've been asking planning staff to do some sort of report on what could be done to get back to sort of a local transit service for the city, either by partnering with the business community, running shuttles, partnering with ART, the Arlington bus service, or perhaps even Fairfax Connector, the Fairfax County bus service. And so one of the things I wanted to do is to sort of start the conversation, and that's what this memo was intended to do. was talk about sort of what do you want to get out of that transit service. So the city used to have the George system, and that was canceled. So certainly we don't want to stand up another system that's going to get canceled a few years after it started. So the idea is to have a conversation about what do you want to do with the bus service. Do you want to provide mobility for low-income individuals? Do you want to create a transit environment where people can move throughout the city via transit? Do you want to enable residents to live car light or car free? Or do you want to try and connect the city to the existing regional transit network? All of those things are different goals, and based on what your real end solution was, or what your end game was, you would design the system differently. And so the idea was to have that conversation with the EDA. What are you trying to do here? Because ultimately what you need to do is get to a system that's effective. And that means having a system that has good design in terms of its network. It matches people's desire lines for travel. It also has speeds that are competitive with other modes, that when people are selecting a destination to travel to, they have to choose how to get there. They could drive there, they could walk there, they could bike there, they could take the bus there. And if the bus is significantly longer than all the other options, then they may well choose not to take the bus. Walking is a particularly sort of effective competitor to short transit trips, because anytime you spend waiting for the bus is time you could have just spent walking to the destination. So you've got to make sure that your system is competitive with what you're trying to do. And lastly, it needs to be very simple. People need to know where the lines are going to go. They need to be able to hop on, hop off, and they also need to know how they're going to pay for the fare. And so that would probably mean linking into the regional transit fare system.
So this one was just to give council a heads up that this dialogue is continuing with the EDA, and we've heard it from the chamber and other community members.
Yep.
Mr. Berg?
As part of that dialogue, is there going to be a dialogue further about various bike share programs?
So on that same night, actually, Professor Ralph Bueller from Virginia Tech is going to be coming in and giving a short presentation about bike share and bicycling in general. For those that don't know, Professor Ralph Bueller is a world expert in bicycling policy, bicycle systems. He was actually my advisor when I was at Virginia Tech, so this is a real benefit to have him coming in and talking to the city. So certainly I would encourage people to attend if they're interested in that. And one of the things that I think is going to come out in that conversation is how does the city want to move forward, if it wants to move forward with a bike share feasibility study, ultimately leading to getting bike share in the city.
Can I just make the request that at some point the council get a Good, thank you. The council get a briefing on that about the feasibility, or at least what the next steps are, especially Arlington, as we know, has implemented a bike share program. I don't know what Tyson's plans are as they're working on their build out, but I just want to make sure that we're capturing opportunities to do that, especially with some of the mixed use development projects that are coming online. I think there may be ways of addressing biking needs, especially to our 2 metro stations that are not in the city, but linking those up along with a great asset of the trail that we have.
Absolutely. And I do have some sort of promising information on that already. I was talking to Arlington County staff a couple days ago about the possibility. Typically, jurisdictions own and operate the capital bike share infrastructure. With Falls Church being such a small place relative to sort of other operations that have it, I reached out to Arlington about whether it would be possible for them to actually operate the stations within the city. And they hadn't heard of that before, but they didn't see any sort of initial sort of roadblocks to doing that. So at least in terms of standing up the system, that might be a much faster way for the city to move forward on implementation.
Yeah, if we can do it regionally, that might be a great way to go, or even partnering up with Fairfax County as they're looking at development in Tyson.
Sure.
If I could echo what you just said, I mean, the Mason Road project to me as part of the TDM just seems like a natural, right next to the bike trail, close to the West Falls Church Metro. A lot of reasons to me why that would be a natural first step to this. So just keep that in mind as you're discussing TDMs.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. On to the next item. Mr. Snyder?
Just, Paul, you and I ought to set up a time to talk about the history of our prior effort to create a local bus system, and I can tell you what the assumptions were, what went right, what went wrong, and how we can learn from that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we go on to the next one?
Okay. Next item, We've got Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. So this was intended to be an update and a conversation with the transportation liaisons that cover this group. Typically, Vice Mayor Snyder is the primary cover for this. However, we have a couple alternates with Councilmember Oliver and Councilmember Duncan. And there are going to be a couple upcoming meetings that are important for those liaisons in particular. October 24 is the first one we need to talk about, and that's going to be an all-day workshop, Friday, October 24. The MVTA board will be meeting and discussing a number of items. I'm not sure on the set agenda for that, but I think one likely topic of conversation is going to be how to define long-term benefit. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. The other item that we need is a representative to the PCAC, the Planning Coordination Advisory Committee. This is sort of it's an alternate group to the NVTA board that's supposed to be looking at sort of long-range planning and policy actions for the NVTA. Long-term benefit. So this all goes back to the NVTA funds with the 30% pot and the 70% pot. The 30% pot, provided jurisdictions do the appropriate sort of fund matching, local jurisdictions get those funds to spend as they see fit. The 70% funds, those go to projects selected by the NVTA authority, the NVTA board. And so, however, they are constrained by the state code that each locality is supposed to get a long-term benefit, which isn't defined in the code, equivalent to what they're contributing in additional tax revenue. And so this definition of long-term benefit then becomes very important. Certainly the code intended that there should be a fair, equitable distribution of that. NVTA staff and jurisdictional staff are trying to develop possible definitions, and ultimately it's going to go up to the board for them to decide what it ought to be.
And that's a very challenging issue for the City of Falls Church, because if you recall, the 70% requires a regional intent, and a lot of our projects have a regional benefit, but it's not as obvious as when you do a big highway or bridge connection or a large bus. So our voice will be very critical in that process. So we do know that Vice Mayor Snyder is not available on the 24th, so we do need council representation coverage at that workshop. And for the PCAC meeting, that's going to be on the 22nd, so we would ask that council consider appointing that member at your September 8th meeting next Monday, because we can't wait for your next council. Preliminarily, when we were doing the board and council liaison item, this was rolled in. We've asked that you separate it out, and so then the question would be whether Ms. Oliver can still participate in that with your reassignments, because that was one of the original thoughts. So those are the two asks for feedback this evening from council.
Okay, any feedback? Does anybody have an interest? I know they mentioned you, Councilmember Oliver, but Mr. Duncan, I think you're an alternate as well, so I don't know if either one of you.
What's the time of the meeting on the 22nd, the end time?
I'm not sure of the end time. I would guess that it's going to go for at least an hour, perhaps an hour and a half.
Yeah, but it's not a all-day activity. I know.
Oh, no.
I'm gonna
No, the
be,
22nd is not an all day.
That particular week's tough, because I know I've bought reservations to fly out on the 24th, so I was hoping to get a couple of days of work done that week. I don't know. Ms. Oliver, what about you?
I can probably schedule that. I can probably fit that in my schedule.
The September 22nd one?
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
if you have any problems between now and the 8th, why don't you just send us an email, and we'll try to work it out by the 8th. Anything else, Ms. Messner, on that?
October 24th, council representation is
Oh.
needed.
Okay. And
That
again,
is an all-day one, however.
and Vice Mayor Snyder, you're not available that day?
Job-related travel.
Okay. So the alternates, are Councilmember Duncan and Oliver, are you all the alternates in that? Would either one of you like to do it?
I have no, I mean, October 24th is far enough down the road that I haven't planned my schedule. I just don't know.
Okay, well, maybe could, you three are kind of our transportation specialists. Maybe y'all could look at your schedules and then get back to Wyatt and Cindy, maybe by the end of the week. Would that work?
Yes, it would be helpful to let MVTA know who's covering. Thank you. Paul, next one?
Vice Mayor Snyder, anything else to add on this item before we move on?
Well, yeah, just this is really important, and I want to work with both the council generally and specifically the people that are going to attend the meetings, because the way they define things, the criteria that's used could have million-dollar impacts, even on the city, considering our projects are somewhat smaller than others. And there's a real hard core of people that want to direct as much regional money as they possibly can to a few pet highway projects in the western part of the region. And so this is a real effort to defend our rights, frankly, as contributors and on behalf that our taxpayers contribute. So it's pretty important stuff.
Okay. All right, with that in mind, maybe you all could let us know by the end of the week whether you're available. Why don't we go on to the next item then?
Sure. Just to underscore the sense of importance in this, the city's contributing somewhere in the range of about $2 million every year in these 70% funds, so it makes sense to make sure that the city's getting its share back out. Next item, bus shelter real-time signs. Starting off with the background, there are a couple groups involved before we get down to how it actually sort of interacts with the city's bus shelters. Originally, the money for this is wrapped up with two projects, real-time signs on bus shelters as well as transit signal priority. The real-time signs are information displays mounted to bus shelters that are always on, and they let you know when the next bus is going to arrive, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 3 minutes. Transit signal priority is hardware that's mounted to traffic signals, and the idea is that buses are constantly transmitting signals, sort of announcing their position, and if a bus is approaching a traffic light, the traffic light can hold the green face just a little bit longer so the bus can get through. The idea here is that it's wrapped up in a transportation equity debate that if you've got 40 people on the bus, doesn't it make sense to hold the light for another second so that they can make it through? You're trying to move the greatest number of people you can with the fixed resources that you have. In terms of how this project came about, initially it was funded through a federal Tiger program, which is a competitive program. It was awarded to the Council of Governments, MWCOG. COG handed it off to WMATA for them to implement. And then WMATA is working with the member jurisdictions in order to get these things in the ground. What I'm going to talk about here specifically is the real-time signs for the bus shelters. As it's defined, the project scope that affects the city right now, the city is currently scheduled to receive 7 of these signs at the intersections that I indicated. Project timing. The project funding expires in August of, I've got a typo there. Oh, no, I don't have a typo there. That's correct. The project funding expires in August of 2016, and then it takes WMATA about a month to process all their invoices. So that means the last possible month to put the signs up in the shelters would be July of 2016. That actually lines up fairly well with the city's bus shelter program, which should have the shelters being installed in the summer of 2015. So we would have some leeway in case we miss a deadline on our own side to still be able to participate in this program. Now, the signs themselves and a lot of the engineering work is being paid out of the Tiger Grant. However, not all the costs are being paid out of the Tiger Grant. I enumerated some of those costs here. First, staff coordination. We spend a few hours every month coordinating this effort with WMATA and COG staff, as well as their sort of consultant project managers. And the level of effort we're putting into tracking this is equivalent to the amount of effort we're spending on one traffic calming case. So this is where it gets into the issue of priorities and what do we want to work on first. And I would expect that level of coordination is going to increase substantially. We're going to have to get into system testing. We're going to have to start reviewing the engineering specs. We're going to have to start commenting on them. Up until this point, we've been very hands-off, sort of letting things proceed at their own pace. That gets into the level of engineering review, which is the second one, and then also electrical service. When we costed out the city's bus shelter program, we did not include the cost of electrifying the shelters. We are doing utility surveying, and we are doing engineering for the sites where we're adding pads. So it should be straightforward to add electrical service when we're constructing the pad at a minimal cost, maybe in the $5,000, $10,000 range per site. To a site where we're leaving the pad as is, that would be a more expensive adventure because we don't have costed out any surveying for those sites. So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on as we go forward.
Oh, I'm sorry, what would putting power to the pad get you?
In order to run the signs, WMATA is requiring that you have a direct electrical connection to the electrical service. They're not willing to run off solar panels. And so with sort of these...
Sorry, why aren't they willing to run on green?
They're concerned about power interrupts, and we haven't been able to, this is one of those issues that I haven't been able to track the engineering on this to figure out why they're not willing to run on solar panels and batteries.
Dan? That
Well,
doesn't, that
I'm
doesn't make a
glad you
lot of
brought
sense.
that up. I would be happy to do some legwork to help you guys out on this, but it seems a little preposterous that that even with our military, who has a real mission requirement for steady, diligent power, that they're able to run on solar panels, and we can't do that here. I think the discussion that they're afraid of power outages, the sun not shining, the wind blowing, whatever, these are all specious arguments. This is, at this point in time, well-proven technology. Like I said, you need some help, be happy to give it to you.
Okay, anything else?
No, otherwise we're sort of tracking this along, and it should line up, provided all the cost issues work out.
Okay, great. Maybe the next item?
Okay. Thank you. Next item, transportation program grant schedule. So for background, we'll start out in May of this year. Council adopted Mobility for All Modes as a new transportation chapter for the comprehensive plan. Since that time, staff has been working to align its short and long-term projects and policies with those that were identified in the chapter. The next step in that is getting the CIP and the chapter to agree. The CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, with a list of all the infrastructure projects the city's going to implement over 5 years. And so if you fold out the next sheet, which unfortunately is in very small type when I print it out, this schedule is intended to serve as a bridge between the CIP and the chapter. So the chapter is what provides you your long-term, short-term, and medium-term policies and project goals. And all of those projects are identified in the leftmost column of this chart. So the idea is these are all the projects that you want to achieve according to the chapter with the timeframes for achieving all those things. So then the next step becomes, how do you hunt down funding for these things? When is it available? When do you apply for it? How do you make sure that all your projects are fully funded? So across the top of the page is a listing of grant transportation programs that the city has participated in or has easy access to participate in. And then a brief description of sort of what those grant programs can cover, what level of match is required versus what the program covers. Application schedules so that we don't miss the deadline for any of these things, and then potential programs that we would apply for. So obviously if it's a paving program, we would go after paving money. If it's ped bike money, we would look for a ped bike goal. If it's sort of broad category, we would look for those things that are coming up in the nearest term and need holes to plug in the funding. And we'd also try and keep separate federal money from non-federal money to try and clean up procurement issues. Federal money is more difficult to spend, so you want to use that as little as possible in order to get things done as quickly as possible. And so this is just sort of an information piece to let you know that staff is working to implement the policies set out in the Mobility for All Modes plan, and this is how we're going about making sure the funding lines up and the CIP is in line.
And this, we thought, besides information, is also helpful when you're at the regional transportation meetings, because you can see the different types of funding sources, what it can be used for. So our transportation liaisons can represent the city, but then when we roll back into the budget process, it ties back into the CIP, staff resources, and workload, so you have a holistic picture of how they all tie together.
Great.
It's a real high level of that dense chart.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Stott?
I just have a quick one. You mentioned that federal funds were more difficult to expend. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. A couple of the things that make it difficult, the required contract procurement process is a little bit longer in time, so it has to be out for bid longer. The bid documents have to be reviewed by another sort of entity, another level up, the federal government in this case. And so anytime you go out to spend federal funds, you start adding months to the project just because of the mandated review process and the mandated contract procurement process. Additionally, acquiring right-of-way is very difficult with federal funds as well. It involves a lot more conversation in terms of beforehand, in terms of getting assessments set up, in terms of making sure you say the right things to all the people you're interested in negotiations with. It's very difficult to do sort of swaps of land, just sort of sit down and make a deal with someone under the federal regulations.
It also triggers much more close watch on salary, income, Davis-Bacon, and reporting. And so it's good money, but we tend to want to do it on one big, large project versus a lot of small ones where you'd be replicating that procurement process.
Okay.
I can't help but feel that there are probably people in the COG that we know that could perhaps help us out with some of this and utilize the best practices. I certainly understand your concern that it's going to add an additional level of effort to this, but if the federal funds will help pay for some of that support, I think that, kills two birds with one stone.
Okay. Mr. Duncan, go ahead.
Most of the things on this chart are commendably oriented towards the car light or car-free lifestyle to which we aspire here, and I support that 100%. I noticed down at the bottom there's a slot there that says public parking structure. Just wondering, as we consider development proposals and just generally, building out small area plan concepts, we of course do take cars into some consideration because they're not going to go away for a while. Is there a reason that line doesn't really have any language attached to it, timelines, or in other words, if that is one of our community priorities in development, how would that be reflected on this chart?
Sure. So in terms of the priorities, it's out there as a long-term project. Some of the projects that ended up in long-term weren't there because we didn't want to start on them for a long time, but rather it takes a long time to build them. In terms of a parking garage, even if we started working on it in earnest today, we'd have to identify the land, work with the folks that own it today, come up with plans for the garage, start construction. So, and long-term here doesn't start until starts in 2021. So even starting today, you'd still hit it right at about in 2021 if you were to get started.
So this really refers to a public-only parking structure. I mean, it doesn't contemplate that there might be some cooperative arrangement between the developer and the public somehow that would accelerate the time frame that you talked about there.
Yeah, that's certainly another way we can do it, and we've Wright staff has been and the city has been working with private garage owners. We worked with Kaiser, and I think just throwing this in as a note makes sure that planning staff is cognizant that this is an attempt to increase the availability of automobile parking, and so just putting it in the comp plan makes it possible to have that conversation as we go.
Because in the same way that when we work with an applicant on all these other things, TDMs and so forth, we also could conceivably work with applicants on parking, as we did to some degree at the Harris Teeter project, and I'm just wanting that to be reflected as a priority and an interest, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will say that Arlington County actually had a partnership with every developer that came in the Roslyn-Ballston corridor and in Crystal City that the underground parking that was constructed there was free for use after 6 p.m. or something like that. And so that greatly expanded the amount of parking that was available in that corridor.
That's something we certainly ought to be considering, the shared parking arrangement. If I can, as a final thought on this, I would like to make a comment to you. Councilmember Z and I were at the Hilton Garden Inn, I think a month ago or so. There's not a bike rack to be seen there. I have to say, after all the money we're putting out and efforts to have bike sharrows and a lot of the other things, we really got to make that a priority when we make new development. As I understand it, there's none visible, and the only one that's there is in the garage in the back, and so it's really not useful to guests who might want to consider riding down there and other businesses. And so I would encourage you on new projects, including that one if it's possible at this point, to get them to put in a bike rack of some small nature near the entrance or other visible place so that people will actually ride their bikes to some of the places where we're talking about having people go to. I mean, you know, parking spaces cost a lot. We have traffic issues. We have parking issues in neighborhoods. Getting cars off the street is very helpful. So I would just encourage you to do that, both on that project and all the new ones that come in.
Sure.
And establish a policy as well that, you know, we're going to have a bike rack within 50 feet of an entrance or some kind of defined parameters so that developers and you all know what our expectations are.
Sure. One of the things we've done to support that, the development proposals that have been coming in the last few years, we've been making sure that bicycle parking is provided both near the doors for what's called short-term parking. So the idea is, as someone is coming up to the store, they're only going to be there for maybe 15 minutes to an hour. There's parking right there near the door that's accessible and easily visible for them. You'll see that actually in the proposed Kensington project. There's parking for 12 bikes very close to the door, just off of Lee Street, and it's actually covered by an overhead awning, which is a very nice touch. Also, we've been working to get secure bicycle parking inside the garages. That's intended for folks that are going to be there a long time. Either they're residents and they're going to have their bicycle there overnight or for multiple days, or it's for employees who want to be able to lock up their bike while they're on their shift and know that when they come out it's still there. And we have been pushing developers to stick to the Arlington County Code in terms of what's required in terms of class of parking, whether it's short-term, long-term, and the number of spaces they provide based on the number of employees, number of dwelling units.
Z.
So back to the instant case of the Hilton Garden Inn, they aren't reluctant to put in a secondary bike rack near the entrance. So they said that they'd probably have to come back for site plan review, and I assure them that it would be a hand wave. So if someone could do some outreach and make that happen, make them understand that it's not this big onerous process, it's something we want to do.
Sure. They just came in for a site plan amendment for some signing, and so I can certainly talk to the staff that's leading up that effort and see if we can get some bike racks added in.
I'd be happy to lend you a red pen to mark it in if you need it.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything else, we thank you, Mr. Stoddard, for coming out this evening.
One more item, 70% project plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's you as well. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
We just rolled them all together.
Yeah, but now I'm into my new block of time, so I've got
You've got another 30 minutes.
Five
I got
minutes.
another 15 minutes, I think.
I think it's 3 minutes according to the next time.
Apologies, I lost it somewhere in the paper shuffle on my way down here. So, oh, sorry, you got it?
Yep.
Okay. So this is an item that's coming to you as a work session item tonight with the understanding that it would be brought before the council. We do need a council action on this. Likely it would be on the consent agenda, similar with things of the same ilk previously. The 70% funding that we had mentioned earlier, in fiscal year 14, the NVTA board approved 3 projects that the city put forward: bus shelters along Route 7, pedestrian access to the Intermodal Plaza, and then pedestrian access to the East Falls Church Metro via the Van Buren Street. And so the funding has been approved. In order to access that funding, the city needs to enter into a project agreement. The project agreement stipulates how the city would seek reimbursement, how the city would make timely submittals to NVTA staff to let them know that the project is still moving forward as expected. And so what staff proposes here is that, similar to what we do with the DRPT agreements for WMATA funding, that council grant the city manager an ongoing authority to enter into, on behalf of the city, these project agreements with NVTA. Provided that the project agreements that are being entered into, 1, follow the standard NVTA project form, and 2, the project that's supposed to receive funding is in the city's approved budget ordinance.
And to be clear, the 3 projects that Mr. Stoddard mentioned are in your adopted CIP.
Okay. Comments, questions, Mr. Snyder? Do you have anything to add on this? Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate it. A little ahead of schedule. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, it might be appropriate, since it's transportation-oriented, to just indicate that we're in communication with Fairfax County on the Seven Corners issue, and so we'll be reporting back as that develops in terms of a cooperative approach and one which respects the jurisdictional boundaries.
We do have that. As a staff briefing at the end of the meeting, that is the essence of the briefing, is that there is outreach ongoing right now. Vice Mayor Snyder and Mayor Tarter have both met with the chair of the Seven Corners Task Force to get a briefing, and I think the chair has been very eager to meet with city officials and listen, and then we'll continue to work with them. And Jim Snyder and Lauren Bruce have been active in the planning process as well, and we'll work with the council just in terms of our recommendations in terms of input to Fairfax County. Fairfax County is going to be here on September 15th at your next work session, and you'll get a briefing from them. You all are getting briefed. The City Council and the Planning Commission now will have been briefed well in advance now of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and the Fairfax County Planning Commission, and that is unusual. And so this is a process that I think indicates that the county is really trying to reach out to the key stakeholders, and the city obviously is one, and work with us and listen in terms of shaping the final plan. Jim?
Well, and one thing I might say, and it relates to the transportation issues that Mr. Stoddard covered so well just before this, we have seen progress as we've been meeting with them. We have seen a revised mapping, which I've got copies of, I can hand out to you, showing the proposed realignment, if you will, of the road. More importantly, though, Mr. Snyder, is one of the key things we've been talking about with Fairfax from the beginning is the need to connect Seven Corners with some kind of a transit way that would cross Route 50 and align with Roosevelt Boulevard, Roosevelt Street, so that Route 50 would no longer be the giant barrier. That kind of a project, which would be transit-oriented, not automobile, bicycles, pedestrians, and transit, is something that could be eligible for regional money because you'd have Fairfax, the city, and Arlington. And so a project like that is one of those that might be able to compete effectively for regional dollars and would get the kind of transit-oriented infrastructure built that is hard to get done. So I'll pass these out just for you all's purposes so you can see this revised alignment that we're seeing from Fairfax, which is what we've been pushing for since we began this dialogue.
So are we on to this staff update on Seven Corners right now? I'm just curious. It seems like our agenda has changed a little bit.
We have, since it was brought up, we went into it.
Okay, that's
if
fine.
That's okay. And I was going to suggest also, while Jim Snyder is here, we could also provide the council the briefing on the public engagement process for Mason Row.
Sure.
And then we will have disposed of those two items.
Before we leave the Seven Corners, there are a couple observations I wanted to share with folks. The first is that it's not just about moving the car traffic around, it's about reducing it. And so that's where you bring in the transit element. And there has been there has been a study of improving transit on the Route 7 corner from basically Alexandria to Tyson's Corner. And the issue that I think we've discussed off and on is what is the best route for that? Is the best route for enhanced transit service a bus rapid transit down Route 7 to serve all of our business areas to Tyson's Corner? Or do you go down Roosevelt, go to the East Falls Church Station, and then theoretically up Washington Street back onto Broad? The problem with that is, while that may be the best of all worlds from many standpoints, we may end up having to carry the full costs of any transit from East Falls Church forward because it's totally in our jurisdiction. So there's a lot of work, both staff work and policy work, that the council needs to do along with appropriate input from our citizens. But I appreciate that we're no longer, that the proposal is no longer to lay down asphalt in the city of Falls Church without our agreement, which is a fundamental rule, and that's good. But if we're just simply redirecting the traffic and putting it further down on Route 7, we may move the traffic better, but we still have too large a volume of car traffic to move. So that's where all of this is interconnected. I don't think it requires much right now, but it does require, some discussion by the council as to what the long-term objectives are that we have. Thanks.
And one thing I would like to mention, because one of the reasons when I took this job, I talked with the manager and others about the need for more active engagement with our neighbors, because if we can work well with Fairfax and Arlington, we can each benefit. I'm passing around a piece we did a number of years ago of the Eastern Gateway area, and this is a very important part of the city. It has almost 2 million square feet of developable land. It's presently developed at 0.26 FAR. It includes the Eden Center area. And of course, you can see Roosevelt Street runs right through the middle of it. This shows it before BJ's was built, when the Nolan Plumbing site was there and the warehouse was there. The point is, this is a very underperforming area. When the Virginia Tech study was done at the request of the city and economic development, they estimated that if this area were redeveloped with a more transit-oriented approach, that there could be as much as $12 million additional revenue each year for the city as this area redeveloped compared to what it is now. So, as you all well know, Seven Corners once was, one of the best areas of Fairfax County. Very good shopping, great place to live. It's been passed by like some other close-in suburban areas, and no longer is. The revitalization of Bailey's Crossroads and Seven Corners all depend on and are linked to the Route 7 improvements. Our area, if Fairfax is successful in revitalizing Seven Corners, and our area can also benefit, and we can do this jointly, we have the opportunity, I think, to take advantage of their emphasis on adding more high-value residential in their area. And having that, as you can see, this is mostly commercial, having those new customers shop in Falls Church. And so a cooperative effort where we're able to connect Roosevelt Street and the East Falls Church Metro to Route 7 with the future transit line and a revitalized Falls Church with new customers, I think is a win-win for us. The beauty of it is, in a very small area, we have the ability to have three jurisdictions, so we would qualify for a regional approach, I believe, and that could include, for example, if we had buses or some other kind of even a back and forth to the transit line on Route 7, this could be something where we get some serious regional dollars to help make that happen. So we have a lot at stake in the future, because this area, which is on the edge of the city and is well buffered from neighborhoods by the cemetery, has great visibility and presence. And so this is part of our effort too, is to position this area in the future to become a real economic development asset for the city.
I mean, and if I might, Mr. Mayor, I think this points up a more intensive discussion we need to have. If the choice is between running transit down and ending at East Falls Church or running it down Route 7, there are significant losses by not running it down Route 7 in terms of serving our existing businesses as well as whatever developments we do along Route 7 and Route 7 in Washington. So this is worthy of some significant more discussion. If you could have a best of all worlds, it would probably be run it down Roosevelt, run it back up Washington, and Seven Corners out to Tyson's. The problem is, if you just end up with half of that and it ends up at East Falls Church, yes, you've served Seven Corners, but you haven't served Route 7 in Washington and the whole Route 7 corridor. So therein is the discussion that started and needs some more work, both from staff and policy direction from the council. It's nothing we need to decide tonight.
I think that's,
Could I?
Yes.
Thank you. As your second alternate on some of these transportation organizations, and we don't have to resolve this tonight, obviously, but I would like a better understanding of how everything that Mr. Snyder is talking about, regional opportunities and funding potential and so forth, connects up with, the alphabet soup of groups that we dutifully attend, NVTA, NVTC, et cetera. My experience in going to those meetings, and I haven't been to very many, certainly not as many as Vice Mayor Snyder, is that we spend a lot of time, as he said, talking about building highways out to the Shenandoah. What I want to know is how would we get ourselves on the agenda of an organization like that to talk about the things that we're talking about here right now? Why wouldn't the meeting on October 22nd or whatever it is, devote some time to a project like this? Why did this project come to us through some other avenue rather than through the avenue that we are accustomed to working in a regional context? So if there's anything we can do to, connect our regional participation with Seven Corners, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, the reality is that the Route 7 transit study is exactly in that corridor of decision-making that you're talking about. It's at a preliminary, I think it's in its second stage now.
Second stage.
So we're getting to the point where we're going to need to make some decisions, and this is sort of an initial conversation driven in part by this. And remember, this is a long-term plan as well. This is not going to happen tomorrow. But the reality is that running previous to this and parallel to it, if you will, is the Route 7 transit study that we have been engaged in. There have been occasional briefings of the council. So yes, it's under the management of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and that's in the normal course of where we're going. But we're to the point where the city is going to have to make some judgments as to where and when we want the route to go.
And I think it's important that it would not be a zero-sum game. One of the things, I think I was at a meeting with when you were at NVTC, and Fairfax was making a presentation on transit about the Silver Line, and they neglected to even identify the East Falls Church Station as the beginning of that. And I think we reminded them at that time that their county was undergoing revitalization planning for Bailey's and Seven Corners. They might want to talk to people in their county about how they could best connect these future growth areas so that they're not totally dependent on cars. Because we all know both those areas don't function very well because they're very car dependent. So part of this has been an education process with Fairfax about the opportunities. And I think one of the good aspects of us being involved is we've made some progress, particularly with the chair and the citizens groups who understand this. And I think that's why we've seen progress in terms of the mapping, because we've been talking about the problems with their layout for months. So,
Mr. Z?
So I think that, I thank you for that explanation, and now I understand we're in phase 2. But back to Councilmember Duncan's point of what is the appropriate period of time where we need to, as I understand this question, and broaden this to a larger segment of our population, make them aware that it's not just a bunch of people going to secret meetings late at night in other jurisdictions and reporting out to council here and there, but to be able to ensure that we do have that broader discussion. If you could name a timetable, that'd be good.
I
too.
think we should do a briefing for the council on the Route 7 transit project. I don't think that's appropriate. We've mentioned it from time to time, and they're not secret meetings, they're public meetings. There have been a lot of actually community meetings with Falls Church citizens attending, but it needs to be, I think the point now, it is to the point where it would benefit from more of a council discussion. So.
I think that would be helpful, Mayor, and I think it reinforces the earlier discussion about participation in MVTC and MVTA, because MVTC is leading that project, but this funding grew from a City of Falls Church request to Congressman Moran, and so we need to be present and visible and have our voice heard, and unfortunately, if we are not literally at the table, whether it's a council member or Mr. Stoddard at a staff meeting, we will get overlooked and it will go into the bigger. So I think that's one real clear, specific action. I know when you get to your council work plan, there's regional coordination planned with our 2 neighboring counties. I think that just has to be a constant focus. And then I'm sure we can get Mr. Stoddard to give us an update on the Route 7 and study, because it is in phase 2, and so it is at a critical phase, and that route selection will dramatically impact the city of Falls Church.
And again, I think it should not be a zero-sum game. I would certainly hope we could connect that future route somehow with the West Falls Church Metro Station, so that if you can have connections from that main line to those stations, that makes them, better interconnected, improves connectivity and choices for people who are trying to get from one place to another.
I think there's been a lot of important questions raised here and issues raised, but the bottom line is this is really complicated. There's a lot of interactions. One thing affects something else. When the county moves over here, it pushes us this way, and we have a lot at stake, both negative and positive. And so to me, the bottom line is that we need to slow this process down a little bit as far as the transit portion of this that impacts Falls Church, and really have some more participation by council, the community, and further study. It seems like this maybe got a little ahead of itself. To that end, I think there are going to be some high-level discussions with Supervisor Gross. Those are going to be happening in the near future with myself and I think Vice Mayor Snyder as well, to try to just make sure there's a high-level dialogue as to what's going on and make sure we're all on the same sheet of music. So, but we appreciate the update. We know this isn't the end of things. It's really the beginning of our involvement and understanding of what's going to happen in our discussion of that. So we look forward to the update on the 15th. If there are any new developments in the meantime, please keep us posted. If there are additional materials before that meeting, I want to make sure everyone on council is fully aware and updated with what is going to happen at that meeting so we can ask good questions and really understand what's going to happen. So thank you for tonight, though, and why don't you go on to Mason Road Project, Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, we had a very useful meeting today with staff liaisons and other staff, presentation of the revised application, which has been being distributed. There is tomorrow evening a presentation that's going to be done at the Architectural Advisory Board. Then Thursday there is the town hall that is going to be held by the developer over in the community center. And then the following week, I believe on Wednesday, the 9th, there will be maybe it's Tuesday, there will be an EDA review of the plan. And then the following week after that, Planning Commission will be having kind of a larger session with an overview to which everyone's invited on the 15th. And then on the 17th, I believe, the CACT will also be looking at this. So we're going to there will be lots of opportunities both for individual groups to get their briefing and their input, as well as a broader issue at the session at the Planning Commission, which will be televised so that the public can also hear that presentation. So a lot of outreach, a lot of meetings, and the meeting today was very helpful, I think, for staff and their liaisons to get a better understanding of all the details of the project.
Wyatt, I think you had
Just one thing I was going to add. The meeting on the 15th is hosted by the Planning Commission for the boards and commissions. And the purpose of that meeting is, one, it's a gathering of equals of all the chairs of the boards and commissions to meet with the Planning Commission, have an open house to discuss the project with the developer, hear a developer's proposal, and then have all the boards and commissions have a chance to ask questions of the developer. And so the purpose of that is there will be cross-pollination of ideas. The AAB will hear what the Tree Commission is saying, which is what the Environmental Services Council is saying and thinking about. And also it will be very important, because this project has been pretty fluid in terms of changes that have been made and future changes that will need to be made. We wanted to have all the boards and commissions know what it is they're looking at. And so that's the other purpose of bringing everybody together in one meeting so that everybody understands the context of the project and gets that information together. That is in no way meant to supplant the work of the boards and commissions. The AAB has got a lot of detailed work that they will do on the project for its recommendation to the council, and every board and commission will as well. But this is meant to be a gathering, a convening of all the boards and commissions to share information.
Mr. Baruch?
Just at the appropriate time, I would like the council to get updated on the, I believe it was 5 or so items that were specifically in the motion that I offered, and just what the status of those are as we move forward.
Okay.
So, Wyatt, if those are ready, perhaps during your manager's report, if we can get an update, even if it's very quick. I don't know if there's been any progress on any of those items yet, but.
Yeah. Well, I will give a council report as requested at your next meeting on those. In terms of process overall, what we're intending to do is to bring all the board and commission comments together and bring them back to the council along with any changes to the project since you saw it last. And we would do that in October. And then have a council discussion about final direction to the developer in October, and then the developer resubmits a final application that we receive in November, and then that gets reviewed, and then we have scheduled in early December the council's final action. That's the basic rough outline of how things would need to proceed, and if any of those steps gets delayed, then that December approval timeline would be at risk because we want to obviously get this right.
Mr. Z?
Thank you. I just want to ensure that that the September 15th process works well for all the boards and commissions. We heard some feedback coming out of the last session. That's held for the Kensington that while it's well intentioned, and we're glad you did it, that not everyone was satisfied, so it needs to be done in a way that ensures the satisfaction of all the boards and commissions. And I can't overemphasize that because we don't want to hear the same set of feedback twice. And the other thing is, before you leave tonight, would it be possible to get a little update on what's going on with the technical assistant planning for the land boundary adjustment land?
The ULI, you're talking about the ULI tab?
Yeah,
Before we get to that, why don't we finish this and then maybe a quick update on that?
before he leaves.
Yeah. Is there any other questions on the Mason Road project, Mr. Baruch?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to reiterate what I was trying to get at before. I'm not sure why exactly what you had in mind, but I think having the boards and commissions, they're going to dive into sort of their areas of expertise. I think having the cross-colonization or cross kind of viewpoints is really important. But I think the group of the committees, boards and commissions, really for us is they sort of dive down into the weeds of their areas, and I think having that cross-coordination is really important. But I think what was lacking in this project, and one of the concerns that I'd raised before, is sort of the 30,000-foot level development proposal as it stands. And if we don't have, for example, a second anchor tenant, I think according to the staff report and what I had mentioned, this project is not going to be sustainable and isn't going to be, in my viewpoint, workable, at least from my standpoint. So I don't want that to sort of get lost in the important details and we lose sight of the 30,000 foot, well, what are we actually getting? So I just want to make sure that there's a governor on that process as far as the development plan. And I think the first two items on that motion get to that. So I don't want to, I want to just get a regular briefing on that, even if it's an email to me. If other council members aren't interested, that's fine.
Well, I think the council spoke very clearly in its action on first reading and with the motion and the 5 points. And so I don't think there's any risk of that being lost in the process. But we will continue to keep the council informed of progress that's being made or not being made on those.
Mr. Duncan?
Just following what thank you. Just to follow what Mr. Z said, it's my understanding, right, that the process that you outlined there including the meeting on the 15th, is just the beginning. I mean, each board and commission will have at least one meeting at which they have their sole bite at this project, maybe two meetings. Maybe they could meet in September and October and consider it separately from everything that you talked about before, right? I mean, Mr. Snyder mentioned the Transportation Committee would be examining it on the 17th. So will the AAB, so will the ESC, so will the housing. I mean, that's the way that I understand the process is supposed to work. So that over the course of September and October, each of those groups will have a chance to do what Mr. C said, which is really drill down with the applicant about their specific concerns. Am I correct in surmising that?
Yes, I believe that's correct. We don't think one meeting of everybody can handle it, and so we're trying to line it up so that each group has an opportunity to go into their area of detail. But as the manager mentioned, with the Planning Commission having a session where a broader presentation is
Yes.
made, so a larger group of people, even those not on boards and commissions.
Starting out
See
great, you know, the town hall approach and so, okay, that's good, that's
Yeah.
good. Specifically, the meeting on the 15th is scheduled for, is it a 6:30 start, I think I saw somewhere, Planning Commission?
7 p.m. start.
7 p.m. start. Is it possible that we could arrange the council schedule
Yes.
so that we could at least attend half an hour of
Yes,
that?
we've tried, we've already had discussions about that.
Okay, thank you.
They're not really totally to fruition, but the idea would be that we would push the meeting back, our meeting back, long enough to attend a portion of that meeting, if not all of it, but at least a significant portion. Yes, Ms. Oliver?
So this is just a comment on the process and something that I've heard that I think might make it helpful. I've had boards and commissions ask me, well, what does council want to hear from us after we review this? And I think that it's helpful as they see this for the first time and as they see this on September 15th to say that while it's important that they cross-pollinate their ideas, at the end of the day, each board and commission has an area of expertise. They have a part of our city vision that they're supporting. They have policies that they're supporting. And what we really need to hear from them up front is, does this fit your portion of our vision? Does this fit your portion of our policies that we have in place and the planning that we've done? And I think that the other comments that they might choose to make are useful, but I don't particularly care whether the tree commission likes the architecture as much as whether they think we're meeting our goal to maintain our tree city certification. So I think it just might be helpful to ask them to focus their reports so that right up on top on their report is a key summary for whether or not it's supporting that part of the vision.
That's good, thank you. Okay, why don't we go on to the ULI, Mr. Snyder?
Just very, very quickly, I'd ask the chair of the EDC, do you plan to meet on this project in September?
I think that's all dependent on one of the later topics that we'll get to about what we do to the
Okay, well,
council.
the only point I'm making is that I want to track the progress on
Yeah, I'm
meeting the
happy to
councils.
do that, Dave. I don't
Yeah.
want to cut you off, but I think some council members have strong views about the EDC and Budget Committee, and I think we need to hash that out. I'm not going to keep calling meetings if there's not an interest by the board as a whole to do that. So I have my viewpoints. I know you do as well, and I think we'll get to that. And I think you and I share some similar viewpoints, but if that's not where the collective is, I don't want to start scheduling without hearing everybody out.
The generic
happy
point,
to.
right, the generic point, regardless of how we get there, is that I don't want to be faced with a project with key elements of the council's action not satisfactorily addressed. And we're sitting here in November, and there have been 100 little details changed, but the reality is the fundamental things that the council has to be addressed haven't been addressed. So I think that's something I would just ask staff to help us with, so that those priorities aren't lost in the discussion of the other important things. Thanks.
And I absolutely agree with Vice Mayor Snyder on that.
Which takes me to a point I'd like to make, which is maybe not exactly what Mr. Baruch was saying, but I think it would be helpful for us to be updated on what's going on with the project. I don't want to kind of just let it out for a couple months and have it come back without really having our finger on the pulse of what's happening. For example, we met on, I think, August 11th, and it had a first reading, but there was some clear direction given. I don't know what's been submitted or what hasn't been submitted, what's changed, what hasn't changed, irrespective of our, 5 points or whatever it was in that motion. I just like to know the status of things, and I'm not sure, I feel like I've been fully updated, and maybe there's not much to report, but to the extent you're able even tonight to tell us they've resubmitted with blank units less or blank units more, and whatever you might be able to tell us, I think is helpful to us.
Well, they have resubmitted, so their application conforms with what they presented late in the council's review for first reading. And so the drawings are what you saw on the 11th. They do not reflect substantial changes from that. We got those on Friday before the Labor Day weekend, so we have not reviewed them very carefully, but that's the packet that will go out to boards and commissions. Jim, do you have?
I think that's accurate. We've gotten them, we've just gotten them, we're distributing them. We had a presentation from them to staff, boards of liaisons, but we have yet to dive into the details of them. And that's why I think the manager's saying he'd like to be able to, give you an update after we've had a chance to look at them and see what's totally in them, because we've given them a quick look and we've passed them out, and now we have to, do a hard look.
I mean, at least for myself, I'd like to know.
We have, we literally just got the copy.
No, I understand you might not be prepared tonight, but on Monday, maybe things like the unit count, total density for the different uses, the hotel FAR, or not just FAR, but GFA, retail GFA, parking if that's changed, any transportation changes. We propose to reroute this road or a stoplight or whatever transportation improvements are contemplated, parking changes that have been made, number of units, that sort of thing. But I think just a real quick summary could be in written form and with some, a little bit of verbal report to follow it. But I think basically just people want to know the basics and to make sure we kind of continue to have our finger on the pulse of this project as it goes along. Sure. Okay. Unless there's anything else, why don't we go on to the next matter? Oh, the ULI.
Yeah, just and the commercial components, what are they and how nailed down are they?
So why don't we go on to maybe a brief review of the ULI TAP proposal or project?
We've nailed down the dates with ULI. Susan Bell has been on board helping us do that. We're scheduled for the 15th and the 16th of October. Those dates are hard now. Bob Wolf has been appointed, I think, the chair. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just for the benefit of the public and others, just to understand what we're talking about, because I think a fair amount of people may not understand the acronyms we're discussing. What we're talking about right now is the process planning or joint steering committee is working on the property, the George Mason campus property, and the Urban Land Institute, which is a premier, think tank or study group or professional organization, is agreed through a grant and through city funds to do a study to essentially impanel a group of leading experts in the area to take a look at this property, to answer some questions we're going to pose to them. We have a consultant who's helping us, Susan Bell, who is the former zoning administrator and director of community development in Arlington, is now retired, who's assisting the city with this proposal, this project. We have a date set, and maybe I'll let you take back over, but I was afraid that people watching this or in the audience might not understand, maybe some people on council as well, what we're talking about.
This is the technical advisory panel, and COG is also involved. So city was able to compete for and win this grant to get this at a reduced rate to study this area. Urban Land Institute has done a number of these in the region. Susan Bell has been very involved with ULI as a volunteer and professionally. So we have, we think, a good team to help do this. The dates of the 15th, 16th have been nailed down. We are going to have the event happen at the Hilton Garden Inn. We've been able to nail down space there with their cooperation so that the meetings and the lunch and the dinner and the working space will be at that location. which we think will be much more convenient for city council and school board and the public when presentations are made at the end of the session, also more comfortable for the folks participating. Also a chance to show off a new building and a new hotel in the city to a lot of people from the region who probably haven't been to Falls Church for a while. So I think we're going to have a presentation this Thursday at the joint meeting at 7:30, and we'll talk some more about questions and timing, but I think we've been doing there were some questions that have been drafted and shared, and they may need to be tweaked a little bit more. But we're moving along. I think we're in good shape. We're also working on a briefing book that Susan is putting together with help from staff. So a briefing book will be put together, given to each of the participants in the ULI panel. So we're excited about what it could mean for the city, and I think it will help advance the process of planning that area.
Mr. Z?
When you have a notional 85% agenda and a list of attendees, I think that all of us would want to have that shared with us, so that we have a chance to look it over, review it. It's a seminal event for not only just the steering committee and elected officials of the school board and others that are interested, but is a way of introducing the broader planning perspective to the entire community. So again, I think this is a seminal event, and we should get the word out to everyone that has an interest in this.
October 15th and 16th, yes.
It is, it's a great chance to get some really top-notch expertise, taking a look at this land in an outside perspective. None of these people, I think, can bid on anything, so there's really no vested interest in an outcome that'll go one way or the other. And so it's a great chance, I think, for the city to get some really high-level people taking a look at this land and giving us some unbiased opinions of what we might do there. So anyway, thank you for the update. Unless there's anything else from Mr. Snyder. Ms. Conley?
The Process Planning Committee, is there going to be an update about that anytime soon before the ULI?
We certainly can. I don't know when the next one is planned, but we're happy to put one on to give an update.
Just because I attended the last meeting, and there was a nice report from RTKL about possibilities for that land, that I'm just wondering if that will be presented to council in any way, or?
It will. Right now, RTKL has done some studies, particularly as to school configurations. They're very preliminary, and they're really not at the point yet for public dissemination. But there is that process ongoing. Their work is being done. I just don't think there's really anything to present either to council at this particular moment or the broader public, but that's certainly coming. I don't know exactly when, but it's under progress right now.
I think just the fact that something's under progress is important to say to the public and to council as well, that there are things moving along, because people are starting to ask those questions. What's happening? Why isn't anything happening? Why haven't I heard anything?
We are meeting on essentially a weekly basis now, 7:30 Thursday morning. It is a public meeting. And a lot is occurring and a lot of progress is being made. Part of the problem is that you don't necessarily want to come forth with things that aren't really fully thought through or vetted, and I think that's the process right now, is people really are studying and listening and contemplating things. But we are getting experts involved. RTKL is a well-respected architecture and planning firm. ULI, absolutely top-notch as well. It's going to be studying that, and that's coming in October. So I think your point's well taken, that we need to present this information a little more broadly and publicly, and I think we'll figure out when to do that, but hopefully in the near future. I'm not sure we have anything for you tonight, though.
No, I don't need anything tonight. I just think that we need to make sure that what the work of the Process Planning Committee is actual work, and it's not well known about what is actually happening. And I think we need to make sure that that work is shared.
And we have, in the charter for the group, there's a monthly report that is owed to the council and the school board on its activities, and I'm responsible for getting that report out to you, so I will do that.
Thanks. Unless there's anything else for Mr. Snyder, why don't we let him go on and enjoy the rest of his evening. Mr. Baruch?
I've just got one. It's one that I'd mentioned before. Do we have any updates on what's going on on Washington Boulevard, just across the line in Arlington.
Yes, they're building a very large self-storage facility using the existing industrial zoning. And since the county did not rezone the property to conform with the plan, and they didn't remove that as a by right use, and they ran into difficulties of negotiation, the owner has chosen to build a self-storage facility, which is under construction.
Any, not ground floor retail, just straight out self-storage?
Like if you need a storage unit, there's one available, will be soon. But it's that's what's going forward,
It is, so it's by right?
by right, yeah. That's I know a lot about that area of zoning and that plan, which was done a long time ago, but anyway, that's what's happened, so.
Are all the facades already done and approved, et cetera?
It's basically a by right plan, it meets the height and setbacks and parking, and there is no architectural review that goes with a plan like that.
All of that is very unfortunate. given
And
that
I
it's
think
on
some
our
of this
doorstep.
was, don't want to necessarily characterize it, but I think negotiations broke down between the owner and the county, and he couldn't do what they wanted, and anyway, it got to this stage.
So I think that just reiterates the notion that we got to look at the by right usages that we have in the city.
Mm-hmm.
It also reiterates the notion that we need to be mindful of having a constructive and cooperative relationship with the development community so that we don't end up in the same situation as they did in Arlington, although I must say it's probably a good thing that they're not going to put a grocery or something in there because it'll help bring more people into the city, right?
Okay, well, it is what it is. There's not much we can do about that. Ms. Conley?
Just one more question for Mr. Snyder, and that is about, it is now September 2nd, and our deadline has passed on the split lots, and I'm just wondering if we get an update on that. You may not know it off the top of your head, but soon, how many have been applied for, and what can we expect?
Well, I think I don't have the paper with me, but we have been tracking that. There were some, you can see on Lincoln's, I think it's Lincoln, there's a row of these that have been done, and there are a couple of other lots, one on Oak and one on Pine that have come forward. But, I wouldn't say we exactly had a rush. I mean, I think the good news is that people who wanted to avail themselves of that opportunity have done so. But the practice, the window closed, the door, the barn closed. And so I think what you'll continue to see, though, is removal of older single-family houses. You see signs all over the city, and then in Fairfax as well, where people are taking down smaller, older houses and building larger, expensive new houses. So we may have some reactions as some of that happens.
What's the
because-
window? So in other words, they had to file, I think it was a grading plan by August 1st.
That's correct.
And then how long's the grading plan
I think they had
stay
6 months to take the building down.
So basically, in the next 6 months, we're going to see pretty much what's
But
going
you
to
had to
happen.
have filed by.
I understand,
yeah.
by August 1st. But if they filed, you may not see anything for the next 6 months, but within the next 6 months, we're kind of going to see all we're going to see visually.
Yes, I
Okay.
believe that's right.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it. And why don't we go to the next item, Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Jim. The next item is a report from the Government Ops Committee on council operating procedures and process improvements. And so this is a continuation of the discussion of a month ago. And I would just note in the packet, at the discussion a month ago, there was the discussion about bringing the boards and commissions together, the chairs, to meet with council on a regular basis to talk about how the council and boards and commissions can work effectively together. And there's a draft letter that Celeste Heath prepared at the end of the packet. Before we get to that, let me turn it over to Ms. Connolly and Mr. Duncan.
So this is a continuation of what we talked about in August, and I still don't think it's perfect, and I think we need a bit more conversation about the way to improve these things. And I think we almost have to start with the point number 7 there, that as we're squeezing in EDC meetings prior to city council meetings, we're not doing justice to an important topic. last time we had a meeting, and the Oak Room was filled to overflowing, and 6 of the 7 council members attended that meeting. So there just has to be a better way to have those presentations, make those discussions at a time that shows the importance of such a meeting, and also so that the public can attend and council members can attend and be briefed on everything that we're all interested in hearing about, because it is so important. So what we did was take a second pass at the 2 options. Mr. Baruch had asked for an option 2A, 1A. So I moved it around a little bit, and I don't think it exactly covers what you asked for. And I know that others had some concerns about eliminating Budget and Finance Committee and Economic Development Committee. So that is sort of where we are. And I don't know that this is exactly the very, very best option, but I do think that it's really, it's in your packet. It's on the back of the, there's a proposal on the back of that, yeah. Right. So that just takes that one section and changes it around. I just think that the Budget and Finance Committee and the Economic Development Committee are discussing such important matters for the future of our city that we need to come up with a way to make sure that all that information is before council on a regular basis, and that we're able to discuss it in an appropriate amount of time. So this is where we are, but we can change this, alter this. It's definitely open for discussion. I don't know if anyone else has any feelings on how this would work.
Before we go on, why don't we hear from the other GovOps representative, Mr. Duncan? Do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Connolly. Just to make sure that everybody understands sort of broadly what's being proposed, we would retain 4 public meetings a month, as we have now. They would be scheduled to start at 7:30 p.m. The first Monday council work session would have a focus on economic development, with up to an hour of time for other business. Second meeting would be a regular council meeting. Third Monday would be a work session with a focus on budget and finance, primarily, with, again, up to an hour for other business. Fourth Monday would be a council regular meeting. The concept is basically that 6 or 6:30 p.m. Are difficult times for some council members to arrange to attend a meeting, and difficult for some in the citizenry to attend. And as Ms. Connolly said, just the elbow room available to us when we meet in the Oak Room, either for budget and finance or for the EDC, is insufficient in some circumstances to give everybody a chance to comfortably listen to what's being said and to afford the time to ask the kind of questions that we definitely want to get into more depth on. I mean, I think it's our idea that this notion would encourage us to go into more depth than we've been able to do in my experience, either in meetings that were held at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, which is when the EDC used to meet. Those meetings often began to break up by 8:45 because people had to go to work. Or certainly now when EDC tries to meet at 6:30 and we've got to rush out to the work session or council meeting. So the notion is to embed those 2 very important topics in the work session structure and give them as much time as they reasonably should consume, understanding that if 6 or 7 of us are all here, that we will have to be perhaps more succinct and operate in a more kind of ordered fashion when we ask our questions. In other words, everybody gets one round of questions before anybody speaks again. And that was presented in 2 minutes and a half, so I'm trying to set a good example. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Oliver, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to make a comment that several weeks ago, some of us were asked to speak to the school board about the benefits of committees and the benefit that they can give to a larger governing organization. And when we had that meeting, I was reminded by the fact that Committees can be really, really effective if they have a clear purpose, they have experts in that area that are able to make recommendations to the governing body. When the governing body trusts the committee to do the work and make the recommendations and doesn't need to second guess them. And when there's a regular reporting structure by which information comes back. When you look at the areas of budget and finance and economic development, those are all areas that everybody on this council wants to work with. We have some ideological splits that make it difficult for us to come to a general consensus, and it makes working with committees more difficult. And we have set up committees that consist only of voting council members. We do not allow the staff and other people who are participating to be fully voting members, so that we, actually are so that the committees themselves are sort of separate from council and making a recommendation to council. And I've been struggling with that because I think this is really, really key. And I know that not everybody loves the proposal exactly the way that it is now, and I'm willing to consider other options. But I think that in order to work effectively in these two key policy areas, we have to make some kind of a change. And I think this is the best one that I've seen.
Okay. Other comments?
Can I say one
Ms.
more?
Conley, of course.
Item number 6 is to ensure continuity. The chairs of the EDC and Budget and Finance should continue to lead their respective committee meetings during the work session. And that was, I don't know if that, so that we could still have the economic development leadership, but you're looking at me like that's a crazy idea. I just think that because you've gone down the road thus far leading the Economic Development Committee, it would be a shame to lose all that and switch to another structure completely. So if we had the economic development part that was led in the same way, it may be effective. But it doesn't it doesn't have to be that way. I'm
Okay.
just tossing out ideas here.
Okay. Other comments from other council members maybe we haven't heard from yet? Mr. Z?
Well, looks like a lot of thinking's gone into this. I just don't know, I'm prepared to comment on this tonight, to lend support or to address some of the things that seem to be deficient in this. And I do recognize all this work that has gone into this. My primary premise is that it's just when you have a lot of people working on big things and they work on them all the time, it just it's an inefficient use of the time. So that's why we have small committees. And well, I just need to think about this. Thank you.
So, here's a thought to just throw out, and it doesn't sound like we have people fully ready to participate in the resolution of this. Just something else for thought, maybe, is some ways to reform the committee structure, if there are ways to make, if other people feel there could be made better, and give that a trial run. Let's try having the meetings at a different time, or let's incorporating this different way of doing things and seeing how that works for a month or two. It's just an option. In other words, keeping the current structure, but with changes made to how they operate and their composition or whatever else people might want to do. It's just an idea for consideration. I can see that.
No, I'm listening. Am I speaking?
You can.
Okay. I don't want
For
to.
less than 3 minutes, or 3 minutes.
I
or
know,
less.
right? Start my clock. I will not speak that long. I think that'd be fine. Certainly if we want to try it, as just one member of the Budget and Finance Committee, and actually our problem is that we don't have small working groups. If we had smaller groups, I guess I could see that. But, we've gotten up to 4 because this is a very active council. In my history here in the city. We've had some great councils, and this is a group of people who all really want to get into everything that we do, and that's good. But the downside is, 3 or 4 of us go to a meeting and we hash it out and we know what's going on, and then we've got to kind of hash it out all again because the 3 who didn't come naturally want to hear about that too, and it's just an inefficient use of everybody's time, I think. So the objective is to reduce the number of meetings to lessen the burden on the staff, and again, to hold them at a time which, is a kind of traditional time to set aside for the public's business. And I would submit that 7:30 p.m. is a time when, we can reasonably expect people who are elected to public office to show up. 7:30 in the morning, not so much. 6 or 6:30 at night, not so much. If the Budget Finance Committee could co-locate with the work session that's on the 3rd Monday of the month for a couple of 3 months and see how that works, I'd certainly be happy to experiment with that. And while I appreciate number 6, I would not insist that I needed to lead that committee meeting. I mean, the whole point is for it to be a more collaborative venture, and leadership of the meeting can be done by somebody who's quite good at it, the mayor and the vice mayor.
Okay, so
I have another idea. What if we did this? What if one of our work sessions, we had the Economic Development Committee and the Budget and Finance Committee meeting at the same time in different locations for a Monday work session? And then we would keep that committee structure, but it would, Budget and Finance could be doing the Budget and Finance related things that they need to work on, and the Economic Development Committee could be meeting at the same time in a different place.
part of the issue might be that there's
Staff overlap is the problem. I think staff overlap is the problem there. It's an interesting idea, but yeah, we often need Mr. Shields and Mr. LeCondre in both meetings.
So how about this? Let me throw this out as an idea. Is there a consensus to try to kind of reform or change the existing structure? If there is, then let's maybe set the GovOps committee to try to figure out some recommendations for that. And I know this is dragging on forever and it seems like a big pain, but that's the way things work sometimes. But if there's a consensus that we do try to attempt to keep the current structure and make it better, then let's set off in that direction. If there's not that consensus, there's not really a lot of point spending time talking about it.
I wonder whether it would be useful for people who don't like the proposed reform and want to keep something similar to the existing structure to present their proposal about how the existing committees can structure themselves to work more effectively.
That's a fair point. Do we hear from anybody else? Mr. Baruch?
Yeah, and I thought that that's sort of the road that we were going down with some of the options that we talked about. I think it was a 1A and a 1B. So from my standpoint, sort of breaking up the work sessions into sort of areas of focus makes sense for the first 30 to 60 minutes, which I would say is sort of part one that I certainly would be supportive of. What I don't think we're there yet, and I think this is getting to Mayor Tarter's point, is sort of doing away with the committee structure altogether, which I would say is sort of the, let's test out some changes first and then reevaluate whether that makes sense or not. So I think there's things that we can do. If time is an issue, I think we can work through that. I don't think any of us are wedded to a certain start time or a particular day of the week. I think we can work with Celeste to try to find a convenient time for committee members and staff. And then two, the issue of FOIA and quorums, I think that I know that I had thought through that issue, and I believe that in the governing documents, we actually kicked up the quorum requirements to 3, if I'm not mistaken, Wyatt, to address sort of having 2 council members not being able to talk to each other because of quorum concerns. So I think we may have addressed that, at least in the EDC context, but it's worth taking a look at as well. So I would say before we sort of go to, doing away with the structure altogether, is testing out sort of what I would lay out as part one, which is sort of breaking out the work and the work sessions, and then keeping the Economic Development Committee and the Budget and Finance, but looking at changing the times and the locations and seeing how that works out. And then if we need to, making further changes after that. That's what I would suggest.
Comments to that suggestion?
What would the times be?
We can talk about it now, or we can do some type of, I'm forgetting the name of the program that lets you try to figure out times by people voting on it, trying to figure out what works.
Well, I mean, there's only a small universe of options. We're not going to meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Either we're going to meet, at 6 o'clock or 6:30 before we have a regular council
Well, I
meeting.
think there were just objections to that. So
Or we're not. And if we're not, then we've got to do what Budget and Finance does, right? Which is pick the fourth Tuesday of every month and meet at 7:30 p.m., which,
And that's fine. We could do that for the EDC as well. Just pick another day of the week and meet at 7 or 7:30.
Any comments on what was just proposed? We just heard from
the
Mr. Duncan.
objective, again, was, of the whole proposal was to reduce the number of nightly meetings, not only because of, council members' loads, but staff loads too. If that's not an important objective, then, yeah, I mean, a lot of the driving force of this is taken away, I guess. I don't go anywhere. I'm almost always available to meet in the evening, so it's fine with me. But I know that some people who do work downtown, it's a burden to have to go to a meeting on Monday night, even at 7:30, and then another meeting on Tuesday night at 7:30, and then, they're a liaison to an important board or commission that they want to attend on Wednesday night. It gets to be something akin to a full-time job to do what certain people believe is their due diligence.
Okay, well, too, we need to get to some resolution on this, whether it's just coming back to it another time with a different angle or with some direction. But I think we need to sort of wind down our discussion right now. If you want to make final comments, we've just heard from Mr. Duncan, or other people want to make any additional comments about this matter, so we can try to reach closure, Ms. Oliver?
I guess I would just like to say that I would like to reach closure no later than September 15th, our next work session. I mean, let's not drag this out.
I agree.
Let's set that as a goal, that as a group, we will realize what our consensus or majority is and make a decision then.
Well, do we have a consensus right now?
Well, the guiding principle behind this whole effort is to use council's time more effectively and have fewer meetings. And the impetus behind that is the fact that in the last 5 years, the council has greatly expanded the number of meetings that you all, committees that you all have and meetings that you go to. And so the questions on the table is does the council want to assess that in terms of that's grown, that's changed quite a bit, and assess that and make some changes to it in order to use your time as effectively as possible. One thing that from a staff perspective I will say is that all of our departmental directors are people that have to hike the ball, catch the ball, throw the ball, as well as work on policy. And so a lot of these committees are geared towards policy, obviously, and in supporting that policy work, there is less time for implementation because our mental energy, our time, our effort is geared towards these policy discussions. And it does make them go longer, typically, and have a deeper dive on those, which means, by definition, that there's less time then for implementation and carrying policy out. And that's the cost, I think, organizationally, which is the other driver for the discussion. And so if there was a consensus to continue to push on in this, to really try to wrestle with it and work towards some options, I'd like to see if that is the council's consensus that we want to continue to do that, and we'll continue to engage to try to come up with options to do that.
Okay, so I don't know if we've got a consensus tonight. I don't think we ought to spend that much more time because we do have a schedule and we have other things to do
Do we have,
tonight.
I mean, I'd be interested in hearing from the vice mayor as well.
Well, I think there's value in having people really focus on some of these issues, more so than you can get in a regular work session. I think there just simply is. So I don't know how we get that done, but the EDC was originally set up and then expanded to include appropriately the Planning Commission and the EDA to get people who are willing to commit extra time to focus on particular development projects, and they need it because otherwise the project is presented, it gets lost in sort of a vague discussion, and you don't get a focus on issues like how are we going to get the kind of commercial development that we are after? How do we actually deliver on that? And the Budget and Finance Committee has traditionally played the same role in the budget. It's the ability of volunteers to spend additional time to focus on those particular issues. So I think there was value in that. That's why the committees were set up. And I think you lose some of that if you eliminate committees. But when you have a committee of 4 people, I think the point's well taken. When you have a committee of 4 people, and then you've got this, the timing issues and, where the meeting rooms are, logistical issues. But and I think it's inevitably going to prolong the work session. So, these work sessions are now going routinely till 10:30 or 11. I hope we're willing to have them go to midnight or 1, just like the old days, because we're not meeting separately to focus on the issues. It's like it takes time. And the issue is, do you want to do it all together, or do you want to split some of it off and get some volunteers to really focus on some things? And that's really the question, because I don't see that it's going to take any less time regardless of how we do it. That's my view.
Why don't I propose this for our 15th meeting, that the folks who want to change things, who have a proposal on the table, hone that, kind of come up with your best and final offer of that. People want to keep the structure as it is, maybe with some reforms, come up with a proposal, and let's talk about them both and figure out what we're going to do next time. Just have that as an action item for a consensus, at least, on the 15th.
Could I ask, if I may?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Perhaps in the mayor and vice mayor's scheduling meeting starting tomorrow, if you could try to orient the agendas for our meetings to come this month around the concept that's embedded in the document that Ms. Connolly presented. For instance, if, budget and finance discussions related to the presentations that we'll be receiving on the 15th, I believe, from Mr. LeCondre, could be slated for the work session on the 22nd, then I can't imagine why it would be necessary for the Budget and Finance Committee to meet on the 23rd. So that would be a baby step to try to get people at least exposed to what we're doing here. And if we finish the meeting on the 22nd and we don't feel good about how it all worked out, then that'll tell us, okay, well, this is not going to work. But if we finish that meeting on the 22nd and it turns out that everybody's had a chance to bite at the budget apple to their satisfaction, then maybe we could try that again in October.
Okay, why don't we do that, Wyatt? Just keep that in mind. But also, why don't we go ahead and wrap up this discussion? And again, if I could just reiterate, and last word, Nader, but let's come up with kind of best and final offers of what we propose, different factions might propose as a way to change or improve the way we're doing business. And then let's try to reach the finish line for that 2 weeks from tonight. Mr. Baruch?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think Phil makes a good point. I think one of the things that came out of the Budget and Finance Committee that we spent some time on was how to present some of this information that in a way that's most useful to the council and public as a whole. So I think that preview or pre-vetting was a helpful exercise, and I hope that staff found it useful. And I know that Karen stepped in and kind of drew up sort of I think it was a slide. They were in PowerPoint, so it was quite helpful on ways of just kind of capturing some of the information as we move forward. So I think that's just one example of where these committees are useful. I think to Vice Mayor Snyder's point, I think we're going to spend a heck of a lot of time trying to refine what we're looking for in meetings where all 7 of us are trying to grapple with it. So I would just offer that up as an example of why I think they're somewhat helpful to have that dialogue beforehand, before the information's more publicly discussed, and people start really picking it apart and looking at it. So
Okay, let's go on and move to the next item then, if we can.
And actually, before we go there, one of the requests that I also had for the Government Ops Committee was, given that we've got new staff, and irregardless of whether we have new staff or not, that's putting the evaluation process in order. So I don't know if
Yes,
anything's
and I
happened
actually
on
have
that.
had some conversations with Richard Parker about staff evaluations and how they work, and meeting with new staff, clerk and city attorney ahead of time to talk about expectations and how they would be evaluated. So we are moving along on that one.
What's
Thank
the
you.
start date for the city attorney? September
29th, maybe?
29th?
September 29th, that Monday, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on, try to keep going here tonight.
All right, the next on the agenda is item 4, appointment to the Planning Coordination Advisory Committee of the NVTA. That was discussed briefly. Are we clear on that? So we will
That Monday?
tee that appointment up, action for Monday night.
What's next?
With council coming back from August recess, I thought it'd be useful just to take a look at the council's work plan and provide just a quick update on it. I have a few visuals. It's not just a few visual cues as we're going through a couple of items. The way this is coded, we have the updates coded green for the things that are on track, dark green for the things that are finished, yellow for things that a little bit of not on the original schedule, usually for good reasons, and then red, we don't have any of those in the work plan right now, but red would indicate something that is stopped or on the verge of being canceled due to changing circumstances. This work plan is just a planning document. It is subject to change. It can evolve. But it's to help prioritize the council's work and also keep track of things, of where we are in them. So in our current planning, obviously, we have the Broad and West project, which we've talked about earlier tonight. 400 North Washington, that office building, we are still awaiting the developer's parking analysis, and we'll keep the council up to date on the status of that. For long-range planning and vision, we've listed the items there. There's really no updates to that. On the development process, I would just note that we do have a draft of the voluntary concessions and proffers, which the EDC has had an initial crack at, and we are going to continue to work on that, refine that, get that out then for broader review. And we will also use the Broad and West project, if that does proceed, as a model for having a new standardized set of proffers that will serve as our model going forward.
So you intend to use those in
That
Mason?
template is what we would like to do.
Okay, have those been distributed to the developer in that case?
They're aware of the fact that we're doing this, and we've discussed that with them, and so it won't be a surprise to them.
Okay.
The other items on the development process, developing standard development conditions relating to design and that type of thing. Identifying the highest desired commercial uses. Those are also, we're working in the EDC committee on those 3. The marketing position, we have interviews actually this week for the marketing position that the council approved in the budget last year. And that position obviously will first develop our marketing strategy for the city. And then using the highest desired commercial uses, go out and be focused on recruiting those types of uses for the city.
Mr. Shields, if I can interrupt you for a second, 2
Yes.
things. One, you didn't mention school capital cost contribution. Is there a new number for that?
The analysis on that is underway, and we can talk a little bit about that offline.
Will that be, if you're able to say, will it be available for this new project, Mason Row?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. And then also, with respect to the new hire, I know this is a hire that doesn't fall normally with where council would be kind of directly involved with the hire, but is it possible for council to have some sort of involved, and I know it's a matter of great interest to a lot of people on council to either participate or, see resumes or somehow, we don't want to step in your shoes too much, but is it possible for us to somehow have some involvement in that process?
We could discuss that. Our outreach on the hiring panel has been to the EDA, and so there will be an EDA rep on the hiring panel, but we can discuss a council rep if there's interest in that.
Okay. Is there an interest? Maybe just by nodding heads. Okay. I think there's an interest, Mr. Shields.
Zoning code amendments, no new updates on that, except for at the end, on the next page, an item popped up through a constituent request on having a zoning regulation with respect to trailers in residential districts, and that's under development, and we'll bring that to council shortly.
So if I could just interrupt again, Mr. Shields. So, for example, we heard about a self-storage facility and just outside our borders because it's permitted by right. What is the timetable for us taking a look at those same kind of issues that may arise in our city?
On this schedule, it is to do that over the winter and have that for adoption in the summer.
And who's going to be leading that effort? Staff is going to be working through any council committees, or what's your proposal for that?
Well, we would start with a staff draft of that. We could go through the EDC with that if through that process. Obviously, the Planning Commission is going to review any zoning changes. This is in Susan Bell's scope of work, where we want to have her help on that.
It is, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And that same thing with the parking. Is she working on that right now?
Yes. So in terms of the order of the work, the parking analysis was to be first, and then the commercial use is second.
It will be a work product, in other words, a recommendation for council that we reduce the parking ratios in commercial districts to whatever it might be.
That is correct. First an analysis and report, and then followed with zoning code text.
Recommendation to changes, and the same thing would happen to amending the ordinance to reduce, for example, undesired by right uses.
That's right.
Okay.
On transportation planning, we've talked about that earlier tonight, but we do have here listed in red the request from the last council meeting, which is to assess the staffing level and the resources for transportation planning, and so we've added that in. And that would be at the budget adoption time. That would be part of the whole basket of budget consideration this coming spring. For water...
Before you go on, do we
Yes.
want to start a new line here, if it's not already covered, that addresses the Route 7 transit planning?
Excuse me.
Do we want to add a new line here with regard to the transit planning?
So a briefing for council on the Route 7 transit study?
Well, just a way to keep this on our radar screen.
Mm-hmm.
Call it whatever you want.
And the pedestrian-friendly design standards. Pedestrian-friendly design standards. Is that going to be a staff product, or what's your anticipation of how that might work?
Sorry, where are you?
In the middle of transportation planning?
Yeah. Do you know, Jim, whether we would need consulting services for that, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, we need
In-house.
a lot of consulting service. This is a hugely ambitious work program, and what we're trying to do is fill some of these gaps with specialists. I think Paul can speak to some of this. I think one of the things we want to do on some of the pedestrian-friendly design guidelines is adopt or try to look at what Arlington and some other places have already done, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But Paul, you may want to speak to that.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. In terms of the pedestrian-friendly design standards, one thing I've already been talking about with the Director of Public Works, Mike Collins, is looking at borrowing from Arlington standards, like Jim said, also potentially borrowing from the NACTO Urban Design Guidelines. NACTO is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. It's a counterpoint to AASHTO, the Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. That AASHTO standards tend to be very highway and car focused, whereas NACTO tends to be much more multimodal, transit, pedestrian, bicycle, as well as automobile. And they've put out a standard book of sort of principles and standard streetscapes and cross sections that people ought to be aiming for. They've also got they've also got examples of where you can take something that's highway oriented and you can shift it over time through inexpensive phases, where first you get a pilot project in there and people get used to it before you follow up with the engineering. So it's a phased approach, it's a multimodal approach, and it's ready-made, and it's been tested in other areas across the city. So it's an option that's a good one for this city in the sense that you get to borrow and leverage a lot of other people's work.
I would just suggest that to the extent some of these things are 2 years away or a year away, that if we have a project staring us in the face like Mason Road, which has some real pedestrian issues, some traffic issues, that we not necessarily wait or keep an old standard that we feel is not adequate, but keep it in place till we get something new to actually start working that transition, even if it's just a transition to get better product. It's going to be there if it gets approved for the next 50 years.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And the benefit of all these SE approvals is they're all negotiated, and so, we can use, without the policy in place yet, we can use the best practices that we know to ultimately be in the policy as part of those negotiations, and we do that.
Okay.
We also are looking at, we have one staff person who's working on trying to look at an update of our Washington streetscape and our Broad Street streetscape standards. And we're trying to do part of that in conjunction with the West Broad Street Small Area Plan, see what tweaks could be made to existing standards. So, there's a lot of stuff going on, not many people doing it. So it's a little bit of a juggling act depending on how much is going on in any one area. But we're working on it. But I think we need to work smart and try to use established standards if we can, rather than reinventing them ourselves.
Okay. Why don't we go on to the next topic area? Thank you both.
Thank you.
The next topic area is in sound finances. So we have a lot of these are scheduled for September 15th. We'll have a revisit of the water system proceeds with additional information, additional legal information, as well as additional information from the options the council requested at the last meeting, and actuarial data from Chiron on our FY14 year-end pension status. The next item, just in terms of budget financial presentations, the deck of relevant financial information for the budget. We will have a draft of that on the 15th, which we've discussed with the Budget and Finance Committee.
Excuse me, Mr. Shields. I think Ms. Conley had a question on one
Yeah.
of the topics.
My question just on the stormwater proceeds or the water system proceeds?
Water system proceeds.
We're going to discuss that on September 15th, right? Is that what you just said?
That's correct.
And then do we need to take 2 votes on that? Will that be on the
This would
September
simply be a
22nd?
work session discussion to get
Yes.
consensus on what the actions will be.
Okay. And then is there time in there for that community engagement piece?
I think the
Before
purpose
then.
of the work session discussion would be to arrive at the general direction and then take that out to the public, I believe.
Okay. So then this little orange box will move to fall?
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, in budget financial presentations, the employee classification and compensation study, which that is underway, and we expect to have a report out to the council on that this fall. Outstanding government and outreach.
I'm sorry, could I ask one more question in the water area, the water charge audit status?
We have hired a contractor, RMA and Associates, to conduct an audit of the December billing from our water system. It was the last billing that we did, and so they are on board. They're analyzing the data right now. It has been complicated by the fact that we need to coordinate all of that with Fairfax Water staff, since they are actually the technical experts on our data. But we do have a task force, a citizen task force, that we're interacting with on that plan. I'll be frank, it's gone slower than I think everybody would have desired, including that task force, but it is underway.
Would we expect that we would finish that before we would make a final decision on the water sale proceeds?
I think so. So in outstanding government and outreach, just we will be working. to develop and adopt a citywide strategic plan, goals and objectives that we would develop, and that would help with the budget development as well. So we will target that work in the fall and have that wrapped up in the winter. Regional outreach, looking to set up meetings with Fairfax County and Arlington County this fall and winter. Business outreach, I'll just note a couple of things. We did take a walking tour in June with business owners in the downtown area to identify some sort of easy maintenance things that we could try to address sooner rather than later. Tree trimming has just occurred. I think the business community has responded positively to that. And we have parking painting that will occur in September, and we have a list of other items that we will do in the maintenance area.
Quick question, are we putting up readable signs as to where our parking is?
That's a larger project, and we need to have what we really need is a coherent sign package for the downtown area to direct people in wayfinding. We've taken a step in that direction with the historic wayfinding signs that we did with the grant from the General Assembly, and those are up. Those are on South Washington Street. And they do have welcoming messages on them as part of what they are saying to the community. But in terms of parking directional signs, I think that's a larger effort that we need to get some money for. And right now we're using some very small signs with a sticker on it, and it's not sufficient.
People just driving up and down the main streets don't know where the parking is, I think. Can we?
Well, so with the painting of the city parking spaces, those spaces will be very clearly delineated as being public, and they'll have, so that right there, immediate signage will be much better than it is right now, and they'll be clearly delineated.
For the interim, could we try several signs with big Ps on them so people know where the parking is?
Mm-hmm.
Just, if it's possible to sort of
big piece.
move this
Yeah,
this
I mean,
particular
that's
element along.
That's the standard, yeah.
Yeah.
Commonly recognized.
All right. And I think those are the main items in that area of any updates. On facilities, if you cue to some of the next pictures, Cindy. Here's a picture of the wayfinding signs that we just noted. And right now, we're basically taking the opportunity of some the land right there on South Washington Street. But at the Henderson House, at the Tenor Hill Historic Site, and the Creative Cauldron, these wayfinding signs are geared towards that.
So do we have 6 signs right next to each other? Are they permanent? They're all 6 going to be there together?
Yes. This one shows you how many feet to Cauldron, how many feet to the Henderson House, on the other side, which is hard to see.
Do we have an index to the sign? A sign that has an index to the sign? It seems like a lot at once, I just have to say it.
It catches your attention. Now, if there's some traffic calming on Washington, you need to get a left turn.
That was funny. I like that.
It will be better when we redo this intersection as part of the old intermodal 2 years down the road. It is on free land and headspace. Back of this one says, "Thank you for visiting Falls Church."
You make them flash.
Till we ran out of money, I was gonna have solar panels and lights on them. Back to Mr. Shields.
So on facilities, the Jesse Thackeray Preschool is scheduled for a November opening. That has a stormwater component to it as well that will be completed at the same time. The Mount Daniel Elementary School, we have the bond authorization that the council has acted on, the referendum authorization, and the selection committee has selected the builder for the school, and now we will wait for the voters to take their action in November. If the voters vote yes, then we will immediately have on the council agenda the bonding documents for that. City Hall and Public Safety improvements, the council has appointed the task force for that, and That work is proceeding. The fire station, with the contract approval, Arlington County is moving forward with the CIP improvements at the fire station. The library has recently commissioned the update to its planning effort, and that's a $25,000 additional work for the planning group that they had hired last year. And that will include assessment of options and parking that potentially could be immediately adjacent on the commercial property next door. In terms of parks, the Howard Herman Stream Valley Park is the daylighting project that is underway, and that is it's a big project that is going on there. It's kind of back in the woods there, so I encourage people to go take a look. It's pretty dramatic what's happening back there right now. The West End Park improvements, we do have the bid documents complete, and we'll bring those to council. Council was briefed on that recently. We got your feedback, and so we'll review the bid documents and look for contract approval for that. The Tenor Hill Historic Site is under construction. And is on schedule. And shifting down to transportation, we've discussed a number of these items tonight already. I would just note the South Washington Street improvements. We do have 30% preliminary engineering for those improvements at this point. Those are under review. The Roosevelt sidewalk improvements and intersection improvements, those are at 100% complete plans now, and those are under review. And we were, with the EDA's instigation, we have the bicycle sharrows installed and wayfinding signs on Mark, as Paul Stoddard mentioned earlier. Also at Mary Ellen Henderson, there's a traffic calming project that will be completed on Saturday.
Real briefly, what's the traffic calming at MEH?
What that is, to make it safer for all the kids who are now walking to MEH to be able to cross what is a very busy street inside the campus, because all the parents are dropping the kids off as well. So it'll be a little bit more clearly marked in terms of the ped crossing, and there'll be some bump outs to try to slow the traffic down a little bit.
So you walked across it this morning when I saw you
I didn't
there.
notice it. I didn't notice any of that. I have to tell you. That's why I was asking.
There's tomorrow when you walk, take a look between the high school and the middle school. The curbs come out further. There's little rumble strips at the edge. Is there going to be a raised crosswalk or just a?
Yeah, it will be a raised crosswalk.
And that's going to happen the next 3 days. This is September 7th, so it's going to happen the next 5 days.
So the concrete work is done. The paving work's going to be done over the weekend.
Okay.
For the raised crosswalk.
And then it's also in the front there, at the front entrance to the middle school. There's a same.
Great, thanks. I didn't want to slow you down.
Could
but,
I ask
yeah,
just
sure.
one question about signalization on Broad Street? What do we, on Broad Street, the perception is that a lot of the traffic backs up because people want to turn left, and they block the left lane, and the right lane is, there's a bus in it, and everybody stops and nobody can move. Why don't we have left turn advance options on several of our intersections along Broad Street, so that 2 or 3 cars can make the left turn and clear out, so that a big line doesn't queue up behind them?
Well, typically, if we have a left turn lane, we would have that. But if we don't have the left turn lane, if someone wants to go straight, then that's essentially wasted time in the intersection.
It's like in Alexandria, though. I mean, your right lane would be your through lane, and your left lane is, the advance green, and then once those people go, it can also be a through lane. I mean, this is not like a radical idea. This is what a lot of communities do when they can't put a turn lane in because they don't have enough width. If we not thought about doing that here, or does anybody else think that wouldn't work here? I mean, it works in other places. I'm just asking it, I guess, to be considered.
We have Director of Public Works. I don't know if you want to comment at all, Mr. Collins.
there are some challenges with doing that. It can impede pedestrians, and it is generally an inefficient way of running a signal. But it can be looked at. We do have 2 new transportation staff coming on this month, and we'll have some time to review those kinds of things.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Duncan?
That's fine. Let's just look into it.
Okay. What's next, Mr. Shields?
In the area of, one thing Mike just corrected me on the Roosevelt Street pedestrian improvements and intersection redesign. Those plans are at 60%, not 100%. Stormwater improvements, the Co-Branch daylighting, which I just mentioned, is underway. Jesse Thackeray stormwater detention is underway. The Little Falls, Great Falls flood mitigation project, the work will actually be done here on the City Hall campus. That is out to bid, and that work is going to be taking place after the Fall Festival in October through December, and it will be pretty disruptive here on the campus, and so everybody will know when that project is happening. But that should have a positive impact for Little Falls and Great Falls. The 100 and West Broad repair, we had a collapsed pipe there, and if you go to the next slide, you'll see what the inside of it looked like. And obviously a non-functioning pipe, and we have done repairs on that, and we've also lined the pipe. We view that as an interim repair, but we think that'll have measurable benefits for the flooding that frequently happened on West Broad at that location. The Columbia and Lawton repair is complete. And I'll skip down to the sanitary sewer work that we're doing. We did have a neighborhood meeting in June with 2 sewer sheds where we have had sewer backflows on private property. And we've been working through assessing our prior studies and coming up with some options going forward, and those will be in a response letter that will be, the final draft is on my desk right now, actually today, so that will be sent very shortly. And so that's just a quick high-level update on some of the progress on items, and it is it's a full council work plan, and we'll continue to keep the council up to date, and if there are things that need to come off or be added to it, we'll continue to have that discussion.
Great, thank you. Unless there are other comments on that, why don't we move to council comments? And let me just have the first one before I forget. I see Mr. Laporta back there who brought his license plate, and I would like to encourage, if you'd like to come forward, but I think you'd like to encourage everyone to get the little city license plates. There are forms here in the room for those of you who have not yet done so.
Gary, you want to tell everyone that we're number 10 on your list? You did get the filled out form, right? That's been rattling in your office for a while.
Okay.
Just use that to either shame them or ice bucket challenge or something. I don't know.
All right, do we have any comments from council members? Any questions or comments? Or should we go into closed session?
May I rattle through?
Yes.
Thank you. The lightning round here. During the summer, there was an interview in the news press of the new arborist who very helpfully suggested that perhaps we could have ornamental lighting on our street trees. I would like to see a action plan devised so that we could test that by the 1st of November for this holiday season. You don't have to comment, but I'm just going to rattle through my items here. I noticed that the Parks and Recreation Committee in their minutes of June 4th voted to explore and identify an alternate location for the farmers market because, according to Mr. Schlitt, the current market has outgrown its space. I'd be interested in knowing more about that, and they ask, I believe, that their recommendation be forwarded to council, so I would like to get a little more detail on that if possible. Resolutions and proclamations, I think we all got a notification today from the city clerk about someone who wants us to declare a proclamation for a UN-related event of some sort. I think GovOps ought to take a look and come with a proposal about how we handle all these resolutions and proclamations that are suggested to us, because I've sensed a dis-ease with voting on some of them, particularly when they relate to matters outside our boundary. Maybe there's some standard that we can establish so that, if 10 people petition us to do something, then we consider it, and there's some process. Right now, it seems just completely random. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. We received a letter from a gentleman today about standards for carport construction. I'd be curious about staff's response on that. And finally, the VML meeting is Monday, October the 4th, the 3rd and 4th and 5th, is that right? And the fine City of Falls Church is supposed to receive an award of some sort. I would like you all to discuss in your scheduling meetings whether we might move the meeting of Monday, October the 4th to Wednesday, October the 6th to facilitate the attendance at the VML of staff and any members that might want to attend so that we could have a presence there to receive the award and also to benefit from the discussions that and information that's always disseminated at the VML. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? I tell you, I guess, before you go, Mr. Baruch, why don't we just try to resolve that issue, moving the meeting from the 3rd to the 5th? Is that what you suggested? The Monday to Wednesday, 4th to the 6th?
No, sorry.
6th to the 8th. So there's a meeting on Monday that's currently scheduled, but there's a VML meeting in Roanoke that we all are invited to attend. And apparently we're getting an award, World's Greatest City or something like that. Okay, good. We're number one. Do we have number one hands printed up yet or not yet? I mean, it's certainly a laudable event to go to, or a good event to go to. Is there a desire to us to move that meeting from the Monday to Wednesday? And if so, we can kind of plan that right now.
What are the dates again?
I don't know, the 6th to the 8th, is that what I heard at the end?
Monday, November 6th is our regularly scheduled meeting. Is that right, Ms. Mester?
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry.
Are we October or November?
I'm sorry. October. I misspoke.
So that'd be moving the meeting
Okay.
from Monday to Wednesday, October 6th to October 8th.
I haven't looked at the VML schedule, but usually they meet Sunday through Tuesday, and sometimes there's a mayor's pre-event on Saturday. You all would know about that.
Molly, the Jewish holidays are coming up as well. I'm not sure if we've got conflicts happening with the Jewish holidays. I don't have my calendar up with me.
All right, so why don't you, if you have comments today, make them. If not, why don't you send an email to Wyatt about your preferences? And if we don't hear from you, we'll assume you're neutral. But if you have any preference, you're welcome to express them tonight, now. If you don't, then you can express them by email tomorrow. And if you don't have any preferences.
I'm happy to express my preferences.
go
I'm
for it.
fine. I'm fine with it as long as we're not conflicting with Jewish holidays.
Okay.
Yep. And we may have conflicts on Monday. I'm just not sure anyways.
All right, well, if anyone can check that now, can you get on the internet now, Cindy, just find out anyone else is commenting?
I know that I cannot make a meeting on the 8th, but
You mean Wednesday?
Wednesday the 8th,
But you could make the
I cannot
Monday.
attend a meeting.
You can make Monday, though.
Well, yes, but other people won't be able to make Monday, so. it
I
would
know, I'm
balance
just
out
asking
one way
you,
or the
though.
other.
Well, if you couldn't make either one, then it really kind of wash out. But if you can make Monday, not Wednesday, at least that'll come into play. So you can make Monday, but not Wednesday.
Right,
And are you,
because I'm not planning to attend VML.
okay. Others quickly? Any preferences? If you have anything, say it tonight. Otherwise, just send an email to Wyatt. Okay.
Yeah. Beginning at.
So that's a Saturday, right? Okay, so is that a conflict with you, Nader?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so anyway, we've heard from basically two people, but why don't we just hear and we'll figure something out, okay? Why don't we go into closed session then? Unless
I've
there's
got
anything
one
else.
thing before we go.
Okay, Mr.
I-
Baruch, quickly.
And I think Assistant City Manager Mester has already been recognized, but I think it actually appeared, at least in the latest Virginia Town and City magazine, that she had received the Outstanding Assistant Award. So, picture presented. So.
I'm getting related publications, thank you.
So every publication you'll get acknowledged again. But,
Great, well, congratulations, that's a big honor. We certainly are proud of you. All right, well, why don't we go ahead into closed session then. For our audience, thank you for attending. 2-minute break.
For the vote before you go into break?
Yes, of course, let's do that. You're absolutely right.
That's why we come
It is absolutely right. Upon a motion made by council member and seconded by council member
Duncan.
and passed by a voice vote of city council, council went on closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A29. Discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, including discussion of the terms and scope of such contract where discussions in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. A franchise agreement for electrical service within the City of Falls Church and a franchise agreement with Cox Cable for cable television service within the City of Falls Church. Councilmember Baruch?
Yes.
Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Councilmember Oliver?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Snyder? Yes. Councilmember Z?
Yes.
Councilmember Tartar, yes. Okay.